Our disability is our greatest strength. It gives us a supervision to see the issues facing humanity from a more inclusive perspective and the grit to fight back against all odds. Welcome to Super Adaptables, the More Than Walking Video podcast discussion. Welcome to Super Adaptables, the podcast where people of all abilities gather to discuss pressing issues that affect the disability community and their implications for the world at large. We are your host. I am Corey Pheez, Lee, C4 complete quadriplegic since 2005.
And I'm Jonathan Sigworth, C7 complete quadriplegic since 2006, both of us hailing from the great state of Connecticut.
And we are recording this on Thursday, the 6th of February, 2025. And in a little bit, we'll be discussing a history of the Veterans Healthcare Administration.
And before we do, I just want to let you know, as always, that Super Adaptables this year is made possible in part by a grant from the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation's National Paralysis Resource Center. The information provided and opinions expressed in these podcasts do not necessarily reflect the views of the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation. For more information about the Foundation's National Paralysis Resource Center, visit www.christopherreeve.org. Also, the views expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect those of More Than Walking either, but belong to us as individual speakers.
We want to talk about some of the more recent things that's been going on in the news. And, John, we had a podcast before, and we were talking about the kind of like the decaying and eroding of our democracy. And it seems like there have been recent actions that kind of stoke that fear. And now it's not only just like the vulnerable who are at stake and at jeopardy, but it's also others, our able-bodied counterparts whose lives are being affected too. So recently there has been a drastic call for reducing federal government agencies' workforce and cutting trillions of dollars to Medicaid and other social safety net programs that we all paid into with our taxes to protect us in case of financial hardship and disability.
For many, this executive power grab that is happening, where the president of the United States is deferring authority that should be held by Congress to the wealthiest man in the world, Elon Musk, who's we never voted for, and giving him the ability to shut down whole state departments. This is completely overriding the will and general welfare of Americans in the most powerful country on earth. So there's a huge risk where Congress is not acting as a check, the courts are not acting as a check, and this is literally, the president of the United States trying to wield complete power. And, just as an example, there was an executive action that would have placed on hold federal funding, grants, and loans that would affect, thousands of programs, including Medicaid, SNAP, veterans benefits could have been impacted, and this was put on hold by a federal judge, fortunately. But subsequently, many organizations went into complete panic, including our Centers for Independent Living, which are nationally mandated nonprofits across the country that serve people with disabilities, and they rely on federal funds to keep their lights on, to serve people who need rides for dialysis, who need help finding nursing care and caregiving services. They literally help save lives and support people with disabilities across the country. And their funding is in question. So currently 2,600 programs are in the crosshairs and are subsequently being looked into for wasteful spending and for the cause of promoting efficiency. Government-funded DEI programs, which is actually DEIA, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility, these aim at preventing discrimination and giving everyone equal opportunity for education and employment. And they have been blamed for being wasteful and as the greatest source of incompetence by the current administration and many members of Congress currently in control.
I'm very interested in how to quantify that because I don't think that DEAI hiring practices are wasteful because they also include veterans, which I am one of them.
At this moment, no matter what group you are part of, whether you have a disability, whether you don't, whether you are part of the LGBTQ plus community or not, if you're a veteran or not, no matter what ethnicity you are, if you are, being in solidarity in this moment and realizing that going after initiatives like DEIAV for veterans, this affects all of us. And essentially, what it boils down to is if you can be considered different or unique in any way compared to the mainstream, compared to being white male, historically, that is, who has complained the loudest about DEIA initiatives, white able-bodied males. If you are not part of that group, we really need to stick together, even and speak out against this demonization of these programs that simply try to embrace difference, that simply try to embrace diverse perspectives and the unique experiences we have to bring to the table. It's just it's a lie, and it's shameful that that is what is being blamed. So, for example, I'm just going to play a quick clip in case you haven't heard it. What President Trump said about the DC plane crash that happened, the week after he came into office, in which it was clear that there was no evidence that there was no clear evidence that DEAI hires directly contributed to this horrific accident. And this is what he said.
The FAA is actively recruiting workers who suffer severe intellectual disabilities, psychiatric problems, and other mental and physical conditions under a diversity and inclusion hiring initiative spelled out on the agency's website. Can you imagine?
I mean, so he ends like, can you imagine, people with disabilities working for the FAA, as if, people with disabilities do not deserve to work in any industry that they're capable of working in. I have, being injured in India, I have several friends over there who, one of the best places to get a job is working at the airport. I have several friends who are wheelchair users, a power wheelchair user, a manual wheelchair user, who go around and they help customers find their flights, navigate the lines. And it has been a huge opportunity for them. And to hear the President of the United States shaming the fact that people with disabilities can get a job at airports, if they're doing traffic controlling, I think they would be qualified. But just kind of blaming DEIA in general is just atrocious, and I think it speaks to this idea that, in his mind, people with disabilities are undeserving of the opportunities given to them, and this, I think, connects with the current threatened cuts on Medicaid and social safety nets across the board. That if you are financially vulnerable, if you're physically vulnerable, if you have a disability, you somehow don't deserve these things. And we'll get into this. There's an exception, which is if you are in the armed forces as a society, this controversy doesn't exist, right? As we're going to talk about the Veterans Administration. And we want to talk about, why is there this difference about how people with disabilities and injuries and in vulnerable situations are considered differently in the VA, which is essentially universal health care and benefits for veterans. But somehow we, as a society, don't like that idea and are scared of that idea if it's applied for citizens in general.
Yeah, I mean, just even going back to, his remarks, like, can you imagine, I always joke and say this, but I also mean it. I cannot go faithfully into any type of circus act and say, I want to become the next greatest tightrope walker. I just can't. And I cannot, because then
I
they're
would
going to
love to
say,
see that. I would love to see that with your 2-ton wheelchair, Corey.
you know what, I might be able to pull it off in a couple of
Some
years.
titanium cables.
But I just think it's ridiculous because then it almost implies that those of us with disabilities are like, I don't care what you say or how you feel. You need to just accept me as I am in when it comes down to employment. And I don't think that's what we're saying at all. We're trying to go through the process because first and foremost, we want to just be treated fairly. And so we believe that if we have the necessary qualifications to apply for a job, and if that job can make some reasonable accommodations, not assistance with our work as far as like, no, we can't or we don't know how to do it, but maybe it's, can someone help me to open up the door to use the bathroom? Can someone make sure that
I'm
when I
sorry,
come
Corey.
to
That's too much of a burden.
yeah,
We can't do that.
it might be, or just make sure there's nobody parking in the handicap spaces when I show up to work. You know what I mean? Because I watch a lot of able-bodied people do that, right? And even when there is law enforcement to try to make sure they're getting ticketed, it's not always taking place. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So it's like there's just this bit of audacity that we're just saying, take me as I am and give me everything that's there when there are so many people I know who would love nothing more than to get off of the system, but
Well,
also have
and
equal access to employment.
I mean, and there was a time here in the United States, and is still the case in many countries, where you know people with disabilities, you can't go in the same school as able-bodied kids,
Mhm.
and you know again, my time in India where I was injured, this is still a current thing. There's in fact like a religious stigma in some communities where they don't want their kids in the same classroom as someone with a disability because it's bad luck, right? And they're afraid that's going to rub off on their families. And as Corey's saying, like DEI is not about, hey, I'm disabled, give me everything I want, even if I'm not qualified for it. No, it's, hey, I'm different. I don't care if that's I'm disabled. I don't care if that's I'm trans. I don't care if that's I'm gay. I don't care if that's I'm an ethnic minority. It means, hey, I'm different. Let me live, let me do my job if I'm qualified for it. Don't kick me out just because I'm not part of your club. It's it's insane that we are walking ourselves back to that, um, and this is affecting the military too. With bans on uh, transgender people, especially those who are already serving, who have already proven that they're qualified, who are already proven that they're willing to put their lives on the line for the rest of us.
Yeah, I mean, in truth, I don't think anybody is going to, if you're in the war zone and somebody happens to be transgender, I highly doubt that if they were a medic, you're going to say, don't bandage me because you're trans. I highly doubt it. You know what I mean? You can disagree with, these things and what have you, but I think when it boils down to the absolute truth, whether that's in a healthcare setting, um, whether that's just working your regular 9 to 5, most people are just not going to, argue it
Yeah.
down to that point. But, just going back to um, just, the notion of veterans and why, to some degree, we are like kind of in in another subset special group, off to the side as well, in terms of benefits. So, wars have been being waged since the beginning of time, in which each passing generation, men and women and children are affected by the devastating impact these clashes have on their lives and communities. And oftentimes, when the dust settles, those who serve in uniform return home from these conflicts physically and psychologically different than they did when they first entered the service. And approximately, there are 5.27 million veterans with a service connected injury in the US. And for those who don't understand what service connected injury means, that you either sustained your injury in, during service, or it was aggravated because of something you did in service, even if you happen to be discharged. And many of us as vets, we receive our care at local VA facilities.
Corey, I have a question. If you get injured, if you are serving and you get injured, but it's not service connected, or it doesn't happen when you're in active duty, how does that impact your eligibility for VA benefits?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think you may be able to apply, but you might be denied that type of coverage because, like everything, from the pensions that people received after the Revolutionary War, there was qualification elements to it. And that's one of the biggest things is have happened while you're in service or related to something you did in service. Like we'll take, for instance, like the PAC Act. I want to say that's regarding the burn pits, right? You
Yep.
may have done 4 years in the service, '01 to '05. But if you're around those toxic burn pits and you get cancer later, then that's impacted by your service. Then you can apply. But if you served in the military, got an honorable discharge, which you need that to qualify, chances of you getting your leg damaged because of a motorcycle accident, I highly doubt that you'll probably get the level of, care that you will want because at that point you're a civilian.
Yeah, I mean, and just to highlight that loophole, um, I've mentioned before on the podcast, I've talked to veterans who've they served in the military for years and years, happen to become a quadriplegic when not on duty, and as a result, they're having to consider divorcing their spouse in order to qualify for Medicaid benefits, um, in order to get the services that they need. So it's a real gaping hole there. But to get back to the VA, so with 9.1 million vets enrolled, the Veterans Health Administration is the largest integrated healthcare system consisting of a network of hospitals and clinics that offer a wide range of specialties and benefits to those who have sacrificed the most to get back on track. From the Revolutionary War to the War on Terrorism, it has been America's oath to take care of its wounded service members. Moreover, as we delve into the VA, we want to remind our audience that veterans' benefits are a social safety net that these patriots have earned because of their bravery and honorable commitment to their country. And Corey, I want to say thank you for your service. And could you share briefly your story and how your life has been impacted by your choice to serve?
Yeah, most definitely. So like many seniors in high school, um, can't afford college. Parents can't afford it. Um, and you're looking for some options and what have you. And so I decided to join the Navy in January of 2001. And I was shipped to boot camp September 6th, 2001. And it's ironic because um, my ex-girlfriend during that time, she had said to me, what if a war breaks out? And I was like, war going to break out. Like, I'm going to do my time, get involved in this MGI bill, go to college, get a career. I'm going to be fine. No, did not happen that way. And a war, sure enough, broke out. It's out of the blue. And after that, I completed boot camp, completed apprenticeship school because I went in what they call undesignated. So I was a fireman before I became a machinist mate. And my ship, the Roosevelt, which is an aircraft carrier, was already deployed in the Persian Gulf at that time. Um, so after I got finished with apprenticeship school, I went on leave. And then after leave, I got deployed. And I spent 3 months out there. Returned home following year, got deployed. And by this time, my attitude shifted from just worrying about college to developing a career and making something more of myself than just being enlisted and following orders. I really started diving more into my job as um, a machinist mate and what that could like once I actually decided to get out the Navy, because I know that many of our skill sets translate into different civilian jobs. You can do contracting work. Um, there are people who get jobs as plumbers, well techs. There's cryptologists. You can work in intelligence, and you see that all across the board in government. That's why it's really important to have the right personnel in there, especially those who have experience. And then right before I was getting ready to re-enlist for another 8 years, that's when I got hurt. And as you were telling me about the story of, if you get hurt outside of the confines of the military, now you're scrambling to take part into all the other social safety nets that essentially were covered while you're enlisted, right? Um, Access to the greatest healthcare, I would say perhaps in the world. Um, if I didn't re-enlist, I would have got discharged. What if I broke my neck then? Just a few months shy. And so where I think about that, like, where would I be? But um, I'm thankful that it did happen within the military. And truth be told, there was a lot of questioning. How did this happen? Can someone corroborate your story? It wasn't like just an immediate handout. You know what I
Can
mean?
you share exactly, because I don't think you said it, how you were injured,
Yeah.
what were the
So
circumstances?
2005, June 12th, 2005, I was involved in a diving accident unrelated to work in Virginia Beach, and just ran into the water, thought it was more deep than shallow, broke my neck on impact, and just face down, trying to prepare for death. And that's when, I just cried out to God and was just like, please save me. My body turned around, and one of my friends pulled me out to shore.
So that could have been you if the circumstances had been slightly different. You could,
Oh,
if you hadn't re-enlisted and were considered active at that moment,
yeah.
you could have been denied. You could have been in that same situation.
Yep. Yes, I could have. Because even
Wow.
just thinking about, um, it's not like I had like secondary insurance or anything, right? So when I when I got hurt, they sent me to the closest hospital. That ambulance bill alone was $6,000. I didn't have to pay that, even though it was a different hospital. The VA took care of that.
So I guess the question is then, you know, how has had VA benefits benefited you compared to if you hadn't qualified for them? What would the difference be? Where would you be in life right now if you had fallen through the cracks compared to where you are now?
So I believe um, I'm going to always try to figure it out, but it would definitely have been difficult. Um, Homelessness or in some facility, possibly. not getting the best care that I could have received, like I received in the hospital. Homelessness, not even just because like I wasn't a homeowner at the time, like because I lived on the ship, but homelessness in the fact that I had nowhere near the amount of cash on hand or revenue or anything financially set up that would have been able to take care of that. So I would have been trying to, well, my parents, because I was unconscious, my parents would have been trying to apply for things, different programs, grants, loans, possibly maybe putting up their house. And even that probably wouldn't have covered, um, you know, half, a quarter of what it takes to maintain the lifestyle that makes a person feel meaningful, making them feel that they have the possibility of being active in their community again. Um, because you have to go through the hoop of getting the medical care, then you're going to have to be on particular medications for the rest of your life. You also need some type of wheelchair if you do want to get around in the community, possibly getting your own vehicle, taking public transportation, navigating these things. It's just it's much harder to do it without, that type of social safety net and VA
Yeah.
benefits.
I mean, now you are a homeowner. You are married. You have a father. You're a father of two boys, and you are a musician. And you are actively serving, I believe now on the Connecticut State Independent Living Council.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for the next approval setting,
Oh,
but
okay,
yeah,
okay. We're holding on to. I mean,
I'm
I
close.
guess the point being, like, is it safe to say because of because of access to things like the VA benefits, you are able to be a completely involved, active, contributing citizen in every way?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Because I effectively like it almost feels like you jump in the line. Like when I think about the type of bed I was in, that bed is probably like $200,000 just to make sure I'm not getting pressure ulcers. Just the staff that's waiting on me, and at no point in time is there a bill coming to me. That is the part that is like a breath of fresh air. You know that you need whatever it is you need, and most people will take out credit cards and they'll put themselves in severe debt. But when you know that, no, you're not going to be billed for that. It's
So
a great
this
thing, man.
it sounds like a great feeling, and this sounds to me like what other people talk about universal health care is in other developed countries, where you become disabled, like things are there, like you don't get a bill in the mail, the government pays for it. um Corey, before in we're in the time that we have, can you explain why this isn't communism, why this isn't socialism? Are we, um where did where did the VA originate?
Yeah.
Just so
So,
that we can be sure that uh, we're not going down the rabbit hole by giving out these free benefits to
oh
people.
man, sure. Yeah. Super quick rundown. We have been providing as a nation since its inception during the Revolutionary War period. During that time, when guys will come back and they're disabled and they're unable to work, they started to receive a pension. And these pensions were, you know, also um, there to give not only financial assistance to the disabled, but it eventually turned into all surviving soldiers and sailors of the revolution in 1832 um, that they got pensions and they were paid regardless of rank, financial distress, or physical disability. So we've been doing it since the Revolutionary War period. And then, when you think about hospitalization and caring for veterans there, there was a huge population of the disabled Union veterans from during the Civil War that led Congress to creating the National Homes for Volunteer Disabled Soldiers in 1865. It was a network of 11 regional campuses, which included cemeteries, provided comprehensive communal domiciliary and medical care for veterans. And that pretty much, at that point, it laid the foundation for what we know as the VHA. And then subsequently throughout the years, with each passing conflict, and the veteran population obviously began to increase, more services were created to provide additional benefits to veterans and their families. And under President Hoover, the Veterans Administration was created on July 21st, 1930. In addition to that, it wasn't until 1988 when President Reagan signed a bill that raised the VA to cabinet level status as the Department of Veterans Affairs, which eventually ended up being signed into law under President H.W. Bush. And the irony was during Reagan's administration, he got some pushback, I want to say by his chief of staff, because the idea was to, kind of what we're doing now, shrink big government. But he extended it. Why? Because one of the things we've talked about a lot on this podcast is having more people that look like us represented in all facets of government. Well, Ronald Reagan was a veteran himself too. And he felt the need to owe it to vets for their service, that they too will always be covered and protected. Because you think about it, you're asking, young men and women to put their lives on the line in defense of democracy. Going back to the Revolutionary War period, one of the youngest people to serve was a 10-year-old boy named Richard Lloyd Jones. He was a fifer, the people that keep the cadence in step. They send signals during the battle when they play, a fife, which kind of is like a piccolo. So that level of patriotism has never been lost on us. And the duty and responsibility to those people is important because contractually what they do and what we've done. However, with that being said, I don't think it's in a vacuum where you have to, every step of the way, earn your right to healthcare. Healthcare is a human right. Everything that we do revolves around health. You walking, we have, devices that we wear around our wrists to calculate our steps because we promote health. So the person with a disability who has trouble walking, they need it just as bad as you do. And so I think it's a good model to represent the importance of why all people should have access to healthcare.
I mean, and also as we mentioned, in the current VA system, which is universal healthcare for veterans, there are gaps where veterans who have taken on that risk, who have sacrificed so much just out of circumstance, happen to become disabled outside of the purviews of that system, and they are left holding the bill. And in context, over 70 million US adults report having a disability. That is 1 in 4 adults in the US. Not including people who are institutionalized, like in nursing homes or prisons. There's 41.1 million US civilians, children and adults, or 13.4% of people with a disability as of 2022. The highest concentrations of people with disability are in the South and Midwestern and rural states. That's where you are more likely to find people, per percentage of population in the country. And at the same time, when we are facing massive potential cuts to Medicaid, and we are reducing funding for these programs to pay for tax cuts for the ultra wealthy, this is money being stolen from taxpayers, and not being given back to people who need it most. And people with disabilities deserve and have a right to the healthcare that allows them to thrive, just as Corey and I have experienced in our own lives. It shouldn't be something that you have to earn. Healthcare should not be a merit-based commodity. Yeah, I guess I'll just leave it there. You can't put a price on your ability to pursue the American dream.
Right.
And for us, that means you can't put a price on access to the systems that allow us to live, breathe, and move in our communities.
It's just, what is it going to take for us to see that the examples exist right in front of us that we can follow? I think we're focusing a lot on how much money is being spent versus what really is important, and that's to keep a healthy country. Never mind if it's like, hey, you shouldn't eat this kind of GMO, or couldn't get this. Let's just worry about more preventative care.
No, absolutely. Getting access to these things will allow us to live our lives, will reduce negative health outcomes, reduce the cost of the costliest healthcare system in the world. Maybe the insurance companies will make a little less money, but I think that's okay. I think the executives don't need another private yacht. What do you think, Corey?
Man, listen.
I
need a
feel
private
bad,
yacht.
but I feel bad.
I need an accessible private yacht myself. But yeah, I mean, everybody is in need, and we just need to know how to address it.
All right. Well, thank you, Corey, for a great discussion. And we will be talking more about the ins and outs of veteran benefits and how people have experienced it next week, and as well as their views of this idea of what if we applied it to everyone? What would that look like? What qualms do we have with that? Because we have been there has been a lot of propaganda making us think about healthcare in a certain way, and our right, or whether we have earned the right to have benefits like these. So stay tuned in, and everyone join us next week, and sign up for the More Than Walking newsletter at morethanwalking.com to learn about the topic we will cover next. Also, like, comment, and subscribe to our More Than Walking YouTube channel to watch each podcast, and we'll be dropping new episodes every Monday or Tuesday. Follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. Just search for More Than Walking or Super Adaptables.
And until then, remain encouraged, stay hopeful, and above all else,
Keep adapting.